All right, in this video, I want to talk about the perhaps seemingly contradictory idea that freedom requires discipline. I'll say that again. In order to have freedom, you first need discipline. And I know that that goes against everything in our culture today. Our culture today tells us that in order to truly be free, you need to be able to do whatever you want, whenever you want. You have to be able to act on your impulses and just, no delayed gratification, right? No waiting. Whatever you want, you need to get it right now. And you need to be able to do it right now. And that is actually not freedom. That is actually impulsivity. And that leads to bondage and enslavement, to addictions, to a lot of pain and suffering. So, along with that, one of the things that I hear, Christians or God often being accused of is that, well, God and people who are religious, we just want to ruin other people's fun, right? We just want to make them miserable. And the question is kind of like, why do you care so much what I do in my private life? Well, is this true? I mean, there is this kind of like pop culture image of God as some sort of angry ogre tyrant who just wants us to be miserable, right? He just wants to make sure that nobody can be smiling, right? Because God is angry and he wants everyone else to be pissed off too. Well, I don't think that that's the case. The Bible tells us that God is actually a loving father. And so let's explore that concept for a minute. Because I am also a loving father, or at least I try to be a loving father. I'm not saying I do it perfectly, but I try my best. And I set a ton of rules for my kids. There are rules like don't run inside the house. Another rule is if you want dessert, you have to finish your dinner, your main meal. Another rule is you need to be properly dressed for whatever the weather is if you're going to go outside, right? You shouldn't be wearing a thick coat in the middle of summer, and you shouldn't be in shorts, t-shirts, and flip-flops when it's snowing outside. And yes, my kids have tried to do both of those. And also, another rule would be don't play too close to the street. So, why do I have these rules? Am I a tyrant? Am I an ogre? Do I just want my kids to be miserable? Well, I mean, the first rule that I mentioned, don't run inside the house, we established that rule because they have injured themselves and they've injured other people by running inside, right? You come around a corner at top speed, sprinting at breakneck speed, and they crash into somebody. It could be a brother or a sister. It could be an adult. If it's an adult, the adult is probably bruised up a little bit, but not too badly injured. But the kid, the kid is way lighter than the adult, and the kid is usually the one, the kid that was running is usually the one that is more severely injured, right? So we don't want that. That's for their own good. Don't run inside the house. When I tell them that you can't have dessert unless you finish your main course, your main meal, your meat, your vegetables, the things that are actually healthy for you, well, that's just teaching them good dietary and nutritional habits, right? I don't want them to get diabetes when they grow up. I don't want them to be unhealthy and unable to move and to do the things that they want to do when they're older. And that all starts today. That all starts now with establishing good dietary habits. But kids don't know what good dietary habits are. I mean, who wouldn't want to eat ice cream every day, all for 3 meals a day if you could get away with it? But the problem is we can't get away with it, right? And so we have to establish that discipline of eat good food. And then, you can have a little bit of dessert, but you have to eat the good food first. And so all of this, like I mentioned about being properly dressed for the weather, right? And I mentioned about not playing too close to the street. We have cars that go by at crazy speeds. The speed limit in our neighborhood is not that high, but people ignore that. And, that includes people with giant trucks towing heavy trailers fully loaded down. They're going 50 miles an hour when they shouldn't be, even though it's a residential street. And so we tell our kids, we make these rules for our kids because we love them, right? Not because we hate them, not because we don't want them to be happy, but because we want them to be able to grow up healthy and safe and to flourish and to grow up strong, right? But in order to be strong later in adulthood, you have to first make it to adulthood, right? Okay, what about grown adults? Let's do a mental exercise here. If you blindly gave in to every impulse, you would not be enjoying freedom. You would actually be suffering from chaos and destruction. So let's think about hardcore drugs. I take it. I take the reports that people tell me. Right, I've never done hardcore drugs, and I never will. But people tell me that, man, it's really fun, and I'm sure it is in the moment. Right, I'm sure that first, whether it's a few minutes or a few hours, I'm sure that high is probably super pleasurable. But is it worth the long-term consequences? Well, I don't think so. If you just gave in and did drugs, then you're going to mess up the rest of your life. And yes, there are paths, there are recovery paths, there are ways back from that, but it is really going to mess you up. And just looking at the cost, looking at how other people have gone down that road, no thanks, that's not for me. Let's talk about finances. If you were to impulsively buy whatever you wanted, like as the newest tech gadget, the newest laptop, TV, car, jewelry, shoes, bags, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that piques your fancy, if you were just to spend money like it's going out of style, it doesn't matter how much money you earn, you're going to go bankrupt. You're never going to be able to earn enough to support that. And there are other things that are more important in life, like being able to buy a house, like being able to feed my family, like saving up so that we can go on vacation and not come back, in deep debt. These are things that we prioritize above the small little purchases that, again, would be really fun in the moment, right? It would be really pleasurable. You get that kind of that high, that dopamine high, that rush in the moment. Oh, I just bought a new whatever. But that doesn't last, right? And then there's the whole sexual revolution that we had in the 60s and the 70s, right? The promiscuity. That is a great way to ruin your life. I think one of the best analogies that I've heard is that sex is like a fire. And a fire can be very useful when it's in the fireplace, right? When it's in the confines of a monogamous traditional marriage between a man and a woman, sex is amazing. But when the fire gets out of the fireplace, it burns your house down. And so you can be promiscuous. If you are, you're never going to have that joy and satisfaction of a deeply stable family, of a deeply secure family, of having, a wife and children that know that you are the husband, the father, that know that you are going to be there every single day, that love you deeply, that you love deeply. You're never going to get there. You're never going to experience that satisfaction, that deep joy of having that family if you're promiscuous. You just simply can't. You might have, 20 kids with 20 different women, but you're not, that's just going to lead to chaos. That's just going to lead to eventually the kids that you have getting into trouble of their own, probably ending up in prison. And I say that because there's all these studies about kids need a father, and kids need a father in the home, and kids need their biological father. And if you're out playing the field, well, then you're not at home, right? And if you have 20 kids with 20 women, and I maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but I have met people that have had, 9 children with 9 different people. So if you're doing that, then clearly you're not at home. And you're not at home enough and consistently enough and with enough time to be able to pour yourself into those kids so that they grow up and live good, fruitful, flourishing, healthy adult lives. And so, kind of what I said before, all of the things about giving into impulses, they might be wildly fun in the moment. It's kind of like a roller coaster, right? A roller coaster is super fun for a few minutes. You wouldn't want to be on that roller coaster for a year straight without being able to get off. That would be torture. But if you only go on a roller coaster for, a few minutes out of the year, every year you go to the amusement park or something like that, or maybe it's 2 or 3 times a year, maybe you really like amusement parks, but it's not every day and it's not 24/7. So yes, I'm not saying that you need to live some sort of horribly ascetic lifestyle where you never go out, you never enjoy life, you never, just relax. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is you need to have the discipline where that you're not just doing that every single day, But most of the time, 80% of the time, 90% of the time, you are living a disciplined life. And then, yeah, every so often, okay, go and enjoy your life, right? There are some things, of course, like hardcore drugs and like promiscuity that I think should never be done, because basically you will just ruin your life. And there really is no margin of error there. But this is more, I just want to clarify, this is more for things like if you're saving up money, or even, let's say, alcohol and tobacco. You want to enjoy a cigar every now and again. You want to have a drink with friends every now and again. Great. There's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure that you're not doing that to excess, right? And so getting back to the whole thing about God, ignoring rules leads to chaos, leads to injury, both physical injury and also emotional injury. It leads to suffering, ultimately leads to death and destruction. That's what giving into every impulse does. That's what our conception, our societal, popular conception of freedom is. It's destruction. But self-discipline leads to the good life. And so let's do some more mental exercises here, right? A little thought game, thought exercise. Who is more free? If I let you see two people, and on the one hand, here is a drug addict who, yeah, he or she can freely partake of the drugs that they want. But here's the problem. Here's the catch. They must have those drugs in order just to feel normal. Or you have a non-addict, right? And this non-addict actually still does have the freedom to do those drugs, but that non-addict, out of his or her discipline, freely chooses not to use those drugs. And because this non-addict freely chooses not to use those drugs, this non-addict can enjoy all sorts of things about life. They can go on trips. They can go on vacations. They're not homeless. They haven't spent all their money on drugs. They have enough money to do other things. They're emotionally stable enough, mentally stable enough to hold down a job. They can live in an apartment, or they can own their own home. They can have a stable life, and they can enjoy so many things about that life. Whereas that addict really only enjoys the drugs, doesn't really enjoy anything else, and probably hates his or her addiction, but is enslaved to that addiction, can't break free of that addiction, right? Who's more free? Who's the one that actually has freedom? And you can apply this kind of mental game to all sorts of addictions, right? Video games, pornography, food, shopping, gambling. It doesn't have to be hardcore drugs. This holds true for all sorts of addictions. Who is more free? It's a person that's not addicted. It's a person that has the freedom to say yes, but internally has the discipline to say, no, that's not good for me, so I don't want it. Another example I thought of was finances, right? When I was in my early 20s and 30s, I tried to save about half of my salary. It wasn't easy, and I don't think that I ever actually did save half of my salary, but because I was trying to, I often did save a quarter, a third of my salary, so 50% was the goal that I never quite got to. And that was just something that my dad had told me when I was a kid. He just said, hey, when you're single, you have very few expenses. When you have a family, you will have a lot of expenses. So when you're single, save up so that when you have a family, you have something to dip into, right? You have that rainy day fund, but more than just a rainy day fund, right? And so let's not talk about me and my, I guess, specific example, but let's talk about a theoretical person young person, could be a guy, could be a gal, in their early 20s, who is trying to save up for a down payment on a house. And they're not going to do that overnight. They know it's going to be a long road, but let's say that they save up for 5 years. Well, in order to do that, they're sacrificing fun time with friends, right? They're not going to go out to eat as often. They probably still will go out to eat. I still went out to eat when I was in my 20s, but just not as often as my friends did, right? And I guess the contrast was actually very different. I might go out on the weekends, but they'd be going out every single night. They may not go out to the movies as often. They may not do crazy trips as often. Hey, we're going to go to the Caribbean. Oh, we're going to go to, I don't know, some resort in Mexico. Like, yeah, you can do that in your 20s because you're single and you probably, have a decent salary. Or even if you don't have a decent salary, just the fact that you're single, you have no one, no responsibilities other than yourself to take care of. You're just taking care of your own rent. You're taking care of your own food. You're taking care of your own bills. man, my electric bill is like so much higher now that I have a family, right? When my family's gone, my electric bill goes down to like half or like a quarter of what it normally is. So this person is giving up a lot, and they'll probably get made fun of, right? Like, why are you being so miserly? Or why are you penny pitching like that? Why don't you come out with us? Why don't you have some fun? Why don't you relax a little bit? But let's fast forward, and in 5 years, let's say that this person is able to save up enough for a down payment, buys that house, and then continues to live that way for another 15 years, which sounds crazy. That's 20 years of kind of financially living underneath your means and not living over your means, right? Which is very countercultural these days. In 20 years, so like now when they're in their early 40s or mid 40s, now they have their own home. They fully own their own home, right? Because if you keep continuing those habits, you can pay off your mortgage in 15 years. So 5 years to save up, 15 years to pay off the mortgage, that's 20 years from 20s to your 40s. And now what? Now what do you have? You have a lot more financial freedom. Once you pay off your own home, really all you're paying for is utilities, some maintenance costs, insurance, and depending on where you live in the states, property tax, which may be very high in some states, but is still less than rent, or maybe pretty low in some states. It depends on where you live, right? But compared to continually paying rent to a landlord and never seeing a cent of that back, you're paying into your own home, you're building equity, and the cost of you living there has just gone way down because you're not paying a mortgage anymore, and really all you're paying is like property tax and the things that you consume anyway, like, right, utilities, insurance, things like that. And so now you have the financial freedom to take good family vacations without going into debt, to buy fancier cars without going into debt. You could probably pay cash with those, instead of having a loan. You can take your husband or wife out to a nice dinner probably every week if you wanted to, right? This is now the freedom that person will have after 20 years. Yes, 20 years of sacrifice. 20 years seems like a long time. But that discipline pays off, right? That discipline pays off. And then what about health and fitness? I mean, no one likes to work out or eat healthy. And okay, maybe it's an exaggeration to say no one. Probably some crazy people do, but they are crazy. Most of us, right? We just want to sit on the couch, watching TV, eating junk food like burgers and pizzas, chips, popcorn, whatever, right? That's what we want to do, naturally. But it's occurred to me, as I've seen a lot of older people in my life age, that there is this big category of people that are unhealthy, that can't walk on their own, that are always in danger of falling down. I mean, I'm not even talking about if it's icy outside or going up and down steps. I mean, just across a flat inside surface, they are very fearful that they're going to fall over because their balance is bad, because their bones are weak, their joints are bad, so on and so forth. And I know some older folks that are on oxygen, right? That are even in a wheelchair. They used to be able to walk. Now they're in a wheelchair, or now they have to use a walker, and they have to sit down every so often. There's a smaller group of people, of older folks, including folks that I've known that into their 90s, that are very active, very spry, that could probably run up a mountain if they wanted to, and can still, play tennis or play golf or just do whatever. I mean, they can go garden. They can just do whatever they want to do because they're still physically able. That's a much smaller portion of the population. Well, how do I make sure that I am one of those and not one of the bigger population that is just, I mean, they're still alive, but their health is shot. Well, I need to work out right now, and I need to eat healthy right now. I need to force myself to move and sweat and feel uncomfortable and have burning lungs and burning muscles, for a little while, so that hopefully when I'm 80, I can still go hiking when I want to, right? And I need to eat healthy now so that I don't have diabetes or I don't have any sort of metabolism problems in the future, and so that I can be here for a long, long time to be with my kids and to see them grow up and to see my grandkids. And if the Lord is so willing to bless me, even my great-grandkids, right? And so kind of getting back to the original premise, God designed everything He designed our universe. He designed our world. He designed humans and humanity. He knows every intricate detail on what is and what is not good for us. And he knows how individually, each of us, what we need to do to function at our best. He also knows what kind of values that our society needs, right? And what kind of social mores that we need so that our society and the communities around us can flourish, and that we have maximum human flourishing as a whole. And so the reason that God gives us all these rules in the Bible is because he loves us. He doesn't hate us. He's our loving Father. He tells us these things so that we may live well and have good lives. He wants us to enjoy our lives. He wants us to be deeply satisfied. He wants us to be filled with joy every day. But in order to do that, we need to trust him. And he leaves it up to us. He didn't create us as automatons. He didn't create us as robots. He leaves that choice up to us. Do we trust him enough to follow his rules, or do we not? So remember, discipline is sacrificing today for the sake of tomorrow. Too many of us in these days sacrifice tomorrow for the sake of today. And that's a choice that you can't get back. You can't turn back time. You can do things to try to make up for it. You can do things to try to, soften the blow of that, eventually when you come to your senses. But it's better to turn that ship around as soon as you can. So let me ask you, will you trust him? Will you trust God? Will you discipline yourself to follow his rules so that you might have a deeply satisfying life, rather than always being on that roller coaster, chasing the fleeting highs of so-called freedom, which is really impulsivity? Will you choose to have true freedom that only comes with discipline? The Bible tells us that no discipline is pleasant at the time, but in due season it yields the harvest of righteousness. So trust God. I hope you make the right choice. And remember, you are not a cosmic accident. You were faithful.